Welcome to the Inspired Impact Podcast, where dedicated female professionals share how they inspire impact every day. Authentic stories, passionate commitment, lives transformed. I'm your host, Judy Carlson. Welcome to today's episode of the Inspired Impact Podcast. Today's guest is a woman making a difference in sustainable development. Her goal is to develop and deliver projects that improve people's lives and generate quantifiable benefits for the local community. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Emilie Baratta. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Judy. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be so fun. I can't wait to hear your journey. I've learned a lot about you, but I don't know the beginning starts of your journey. So if you're open to sharing how you got to where you are from the beginning, that would be great.
Okay, well, I'm not really sure exactly where to start, so I will just pick a spot and go. Let's see, I majored in English in college because I didn't really know what to major in. I sort of figured out about halfway through that the world is basically controlled by money and tried to shift majors, and it was a little bit too late. So my first real job out of college was at Planned Parenthood of New York City. So I've always been very mission driven. I did a lot of work around environmentalism and a lot of work around women's rights in college. So I was really very excited to get this job, and I had the best boss I've ever had, and she's still a very good friend of mine. So I worked there for a few years, decided that I would become a public health doctor. So I went to Columbia's pre-med post-baccalaureate program, and I spent a summer, it's a 2-year program. I spent the summer volunteering at a public hospital in Spanish Harlem, and pretty soon realized that I wasn't going to be happy as a public health doctor for various different reasons, even though, I mean, it was a great experience and I met some wonderful doctors. At that point, my partner at the time, who we eventually got married, he got into law school in Michigan. We were living in New York City. And so we moved to Ann Arbor. And while I was there, I wound up doing some consulting for various different nonprofits, the American Cancer Society and Girls Incorporated and Planned Parenthood, among others, the Journal of the American Medical Women's Association. And I decided to apply to both MFA programs and MBA programs because my passion is writing, but I'd also become very keenly aware by that point that I did not understand how the world really did work, having been an English major, having worked exclusively in nonprofits, and that I wanted to understand how the world worked because it would benefit me and potentially help me make a bigger difference. So I did apply to the University of Michigan, both of their programs, both of the MFA program there and the MBA program are top 10. At the time, the MBA program was the top business program in the country. So I got into the business school and I did not get into the Master's in Fine Arts program. So that decided that. And then I hated business school. It was a culture shock because my background was really working with women and children's rights and minorities. Business school is all about money and it is very male dominated. So even the top business schools, Harvard, Michigan, Yale was not in there at the time, but none of them could really get their above 32% in terms of women. It's still sort of an interesting statistic, but I did get in. I didn't like it. I didn't like being around so many people whose primary motivation was just making as much money at any cost.
Sure.
So I decided that I was going to start a nonprofit that would be the sort of an arts generator. I'd get a city to sell me a building for $1, some sort of post-industrial, burnt out city core. This was right around the time, this was in the early aughts when cities were really turning around. And cities were doing this. They were selling buildings, old burnt out buildings to nonprofits for very inexpensive amounts of money if it looked like they could become an economic revitalization type engine.
Okay.
So I guess at that point we were married. My husband and I planned a trip and I met up the coast of the East Coast because I'm from the Mid-Atlantic, sort of. Um, and I met with a bunch of economic development officers in various different cities and realized that while I felt pretty confident that I could put together the business plan for a nonprofit arts, like I was patterning it a little bit on Provincetown at that time,
Mhm.
but I didn't I became more aware that I didn't understand buildings and that it was very complicated. So when I went back to business school, I took some real estate development courses and I really fell in love with real estate development because when done the way I like to do it, it's this interesting nexus, this confluence of sort of environmental activism, community activism, and then, you're effecting real change.
Right.
So all of that sounded exciting to me. It's really very, very difficult to get into real estate development, especially as a woman, but it's difficult no matter what. So I did a tremendous amount of networking. I wound up with a job in Baltimore. I worked for Struver Brothers, Eccles and Rouse, which at the time was pretty much the largest vertically integrated development and construction firm in the Mid-Atlantic. Um, they did not survive the 2007 crash. They did a lot of cross-collateralization amongst their different real estate development projects. But at the time, they were very robust and they did some of the most interesting work out there. So we utilized historic tax credits and affordable tax credits where they were available. We utilized, green tax credits. Um, we worked on power plants, lots of old manufacturing buildings, really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked there for a few years, and then we had picked Baltimore in that area in part because my mom was very sick, and so she did pass away. And
Mm-hmm.
my husband was not a huge fan of Baltimore, so we pretty much I got a job out here in Denver. We moved close to sight unseen. We thought it was very entertaining that we were moving to a square state because if you grow up on the East Coast, there aren't square states. Um, so we got out here and we fell in love with Colorado. Really enjoyed it. Would never have come, I don't know, it was sort of an adventure. The
Mm-hmm.
job that I took, I lasted for about a year. I was working for two men who had presented themselves as they were real estate brokers, but they were angling to get into real estate development, and they were consultants. They're a really impressive roster of clients. So they had the Denver Public Schools, and a whole handful of other sort of very muscular nonprofits, as well as some for-profits. But it wasn't a very good fit, and they weren't really interested in doing development, which is kind of where my passion was.
Mm-hmm.
Then 2007, 2008 hit, and the real estate sector was responsible for all of the problems of the country. So I was unemployed for, I don't know, around a year.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of networking, I did a lot of volunteering. Eventually, I wound up with a job at a small local developer who specialized in LEED Gold buildings.
Mm-hmm.
The LEED system, I think, did a great job of transforming the codes throughout the country, um, which, helped ultimately diminish, I think, their role because ultimately they did want
Mm-hmm.
new buildings and major renovations to be built with an eye towards sustainability. And a lot of the planning departments adopted some of the systems. And so then the systems became sort of mandatory. Anyway,
Sure.
that's a sort of an aside. But
Mm-hmm.
so I worked there for a few years and I ultimately hit a glass ceiling.
Oh.
I was negotiating in good faith. It took me about a year to understand that they were negotiating in bad faith. I had started raising the co-invest for major projects. I was managing projects. So with the support of my husband, he said, okay, go for it. I quit and I started my own real estate development firm called Turnbuckle. Justin, my husband, who's now my ex-husband, and I owned the URL because when we were young, he had run a small record label in New York City called Turnbuckle Records. And so
Oh,
he had
wow.
control of that. And turnbuckles are really important in a lot of construction, most
Okay.
especially civil engineering, but still, it seemed like kind of a fun name
Mm-hmm.
and applicable. So I restarted Turnbuckle as Turnbuckle Development. My first big sticks and bricks and mortar project was the car wash.
Okay.
And what I discovered after I started my own company was a lot of the men who were willing to invest in my projects when I was working for a man were not willing to invest in projects when I was no longer working for a man.
Wow.
So it was really it was a very demoralizing time in my life. And a neighbor said, "Hey, we don't have a car wash in the neighborhood." And initially I thought, who cares? Because I'm a biker,
Sure.
I liked my road bike and I'd never really been into car culture. I loved living in New York City. We didn't own a vehicle. I love public transportation, although I don't really like taking buses, but the subway systems in big cities are wonderful.
Hmm.
But then I thought, okay, well, I'm a small, scrappy little developer now, so weird market niches deserve to be investigated. And
Hmm.
so I kicked the tires on this concept of a car wash and identified several parcels of land. And I started work on the project. I identified a car wash consultant who I figured would, while he hadn't done operations before, he knew a lot about car washing. I thought he would run it. I would be in the background controlling
Okay.
the money, since I was raising all the debt and the equity and doing and developing the project. Um, and then I thought if it worked out well, it would spit off enough cash flow that with some careful monitoring, I would not need to go out trying to raise money for small projects from men who had no intention of investing in me. Although this was also a hard lesson learned. Um, they'd go out to lunch as many times as you wanted. They're very happy to take up your time, but that's the extent of it. So I now tell folks I mean, I don't have a lot of time to do any sort of like networking or mentoring or anything like that right now. But when I did have a little bit more time, I would tell people like, if you don't get a no, or if you don't get a yes or a no within the first two meetings, you move on. You do not let
Hmm.
people waste your time.
Right.
But I had to learn that for myself, and it took me a couple of years.
Hmm.
So as it turned out, the individual I had hired to run the car wash did not adapt or learn as I expected. In fact, I was shocked. I'd
Hmm.
never really worked with someone who was so unwilling to develop themselves.
Oh, sure.
And he was going to run my car wash into the ground. So
Mm.
that didn't work out.
No.
Um, so then I became a car washer. And what I do now,
So you show up at the car wash every day.
pretty much. Yep. The way small real estate development and big real estate development firms work is they typically have, a handful of one to a handful of projects under construction, one to a handful of projects that are in some form of disposition, whether they're stabilizing them, they're selling them, and then they have a pipeline. And so when I opened Gleam, and I did come up with the name for it, and I hired the consultants that did the design, and we've trademarked the logo.
Mm.
I was very active in a lot of parts of the business, not
Hmm.
just the development piece of it. Um, it was second nature to me at that point to sort of, even before it was stabilized, to really look around for the next one.
Sure.
And so I had identified and put under contract and ultimately purchased a 4-acre parcel of property in Aurora. It was very inexpensive, but it needed a lot of entitlement work, which is something
Mm.
that I had spent a decade or so doing.
Wow.
So it seemed pretty good. In retrospect, I would, now that I am a car washer and I wasn't really at that point yet, I would have done this very differently.
Hmm.
Um, but that's what I did. And
Hmm.
so um, I had the debt and the equity kind of lined up, and then COVID hit. It put everything on pause. I spent all my energy working, raising my infants, and also like running the business at that point because
Wow.
I had about 40 employees and it was a terrifying time to be a small business owner. I understand everybody was terrified, but I don't think anyone was as terrified as small business owners because we had
Right.
everything on top of the small business. And I was in a business that you can't do remotely. You can't wash a car over Zoom. It doesn't work. Most of my employees, it's relatively unskilled labor. We give them most of their skills. I have some employees who only speak Spanish. I have about 15% of my employee base who is neurodiverse. I started that at the very beginning. It felt like a lot.
Yeah.
So the second car wash was on hold, then the debt fell through, then the equity fell through, then I needed more debt. Anyway, it was really quite a trial to finance and then develop this second car wash. And I really did think it was going to be a hit,
Mm.
and a success pretty soon after opening, given some of the demographics. But I did build it in the immediate aftermath of COVID. I was a little under the gun from an entitlement perspective. It's a conditional use, and conditional uses do expire.
Mm.
So everything that got built, not just car washes, pretty much everything that got built in the immediate aftermath of COVID cost anywhere from 20 to 50% more. It's
Wow.
really very difficult to control costs, to control
Sure.
the time frame. There were supply chain issues.
Mhm.
So I wound up with a significantly more expensive car wash than I expected, and I opened into the highest inflation that the
Right.
country has seen since the 80s, so in 4 decades. Um, so the second one is trending well, but it's been a big struggle. And so the first one was a big struggle as well. Now it's a very stable little business, but it was very difficult to get off the ground for the
Mm-hmm.
first number of years.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. Now I have 2 car washes.
And you said that you might expand to have a grouping of them
Yeah,
for.
it's called a platform. If you have a number of the same type of businesses, really you need sort of 4, 5, 6 for it to be called a platform. Right now,
Mm,
I just have 2 small car wash. Well, they're large car washes, but they're very far apart,
mm,
which is one of the things that I'd do differently if I had to do it over again. But
mm-hmm,
there was a lot to learn. Car washing is a deceptively complicated business. It's
mm,
actually remarkably complicated,
mm,
very capital intensive. It continues to consume large amounts of capital because the facility is remarkably expensive to keep running, just
mm.
so many parts and pieces. The tunnel is, I mean, probably it's just a very challenging environment for any piece of machinery to continue to function within because it's
Oh,
wet, it's
wow.
dirty, it runs inconstantly. So sometimes we might have 900 car days, other times we might have 30 car days. That's difficult for machinery to adapt to. It
Oh,
likes to just
wow.
run. It likes some sort of consistency. It doesn't like wet. It doesn't like humid. It doesn't like this amount of dirt. So, and it's controlled by a very cranky point of sale computer IT system that was developed by, I believe, I think it was an accountant in the
Mm,
70s.
wow. Really?
Who must have owned car washes. So it's a pretty cranky system, and it's one of the
Huh.
best systems out there. So there's no point of sale system for car washes that is easy. It's not
Wow.
like you're selling a trinket or a necklace or something concrete. You've got recurring income, you have memberships, you have different tiers of applications. So if you buy a $13 or $14 wash, you're getting different treatment than if you're buying a $27 wash. And so
Mm-hmm.
not only does it have to take the right amount of money, it has to load the right wash. It's deceptively complicated.
So is the POS include from the time that someone swipes their credit card for a 13 or a $27 car wash to actually loading into the system what's going to wash their car? Is that all that cranky POS system?
It is indeed.
Oh, wow. You almost wonder why there isn't someone out there building something with the new technology for that.
Oh, they have.
Oh,
It's much more complicated than they thought it would be. And
oh,
so most of the new systems aren't really that much better.
wow.
And the old system that we use, one of the advantages to it is that they do give you product support, which a bunch of the new systems don't because that's expensive and involves humans. And private equity doesn't like investing in humans. They just like exploiting humans. And there was another point to this. Um, Oh, so one advantage is that they do provide product support,
Mhm.
which is hit or miss, but
Yeah.
there are a bunch of good people. But then two, it's adaptable. So my first car wash is pretty complicated, even by car wash standards,
Mhm.
because it's close to what used to be called a full serve. Um, so there are multiple different kinds of car washes, but we also clean and detail the interior of the vehicles. And so we have a lot of different services that we offer. We give
Wow.
discounts to our members. Um, we can combine different services. So we ask a lot of the POS system.
Sure.
And
So,
most of the new ones they have zero flexibility.
so you mentioned the tunnel, which is where the car goes through to get clean, but then you also just mentioned detail. And so how is that built into your car wash business? Is it a separate building? Is it a separate team? How does that work?
So the detailing is important to the business for several different reasons. The most the biggest reason to include detailing is that it's our biggest cost as a business is labor.
Okay.
It's either
Yeah.
labor or debt service,
Mm-hmm.
depending on which.
Yeah.
At the first car wash, because it's called a flex serve car wash, there are about 35 employees.
Mm.
And we have a very unpredictable demand curve. The only predictability is that we will have no demand if the weather is bad. So
Yeah, that's
if it's
right.
actively raining or actively snowing, we don't have a lot of work. So one main reason to offer detailing is it's a way to help manage labor
Oh, yeah.
because you can't always send people home when it's raining or snowing. We do that. We have to do that. But we
Mm-hmm.
try to do that as little as possible because this is people's livelihoods. This is their
Mm-hmm.
rent. This is their groceries.
It
Um,
is.
Detailing is, well, honestly, less profitable by a long shot because it is very labor intensive. Gives us something to do when we don't have vehicles to just do that quick vacuuming,
Right.
interior dusting, etc.
Right.
So it helps kind of smooth out the demand curve. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it also is a service that people really, really want. A clean car feels great. It can contribute to your mental health being better. Cars are also typically very disgusting. We do disinfect them. So we clean it on a number of levels. So there's a real market demand for the service. There's a willingness to pay associated with the service, which is good because, again, it requires tools, time, training, labor. And it's also a point of differentiation. So if someone comes in, our entry level combination interior and exterior service is $39. That combines a $27 exterior wash, which is pretty typical of a top pricing for the top end exterior tunnel wash, with a discount on the interior quick clean. So it's really a very light dusting. It's a quick vacuuming, and we clean the glass and mirrors. That's where we use the word clean.
Mm.
It's not a detail, but those two services combined cost $39, and the public, a certain percentage of the public does believe that for $39 they should get a completely clean car, which is, now that I'm in this business, completely ludicrous, like
Right.
ridiculous beyond belief. But most people are not familiar with details and they see a $40 price point and they're like, oh, perfect. I get a perfectly clean car. So having a full suite of detail options starting at $80 and working their way up to 1,000 is a nice point of differentiation because we can say, absolutely, if you want a really clean car, this is what it takes. It takes time, it takes tools, it takes training and expertise. Um, and obviously, therefore, it's a different price point.
Sure.
So it makes it a little easier for the consumer to understand what they are and are not purchasing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
So are you at both Gleams every day, or do you have someone at one of the Gleams that's managing it? Or, and then um, the other thing I wanted to know, if you're going to go to a platform, is there new ones going to be between the two that you've got, or will they be geographically outside of that, or how are you thinking ahead?
that's an excellent question. And yes, they would link the two ideally, and we would not further disperse
Sure.
this brand because it is difficult. I try to get to both car washes almost every day. It's not
Hmm.
possible. And
Okay.
I have 8-year-old twins.
Right.
So
Oh, wow.
that that just adds to the constraints in terms
Yeah,
of demands on time.
of course.
I don't have any I haven't had any full-time managers for the last 8 months. The management situation of a business that's this complicated is also complicated
Hmm.
because in order to really manage the business, you need to either have someone around who has a deep understanding of IT,
Mm.
mechanics, hydraulics, air pressure situations. We have a lot of employees, so it's a lot of management there. And then we're constantly interfacing with the public. And whether or not people understand this most people have a very emotional response to their vehicle.
Mm.
And it comes out, for better or worse, in a car wash. We see
Wow.
some great behavior and we see some truly astonishingly bad behavior. So all of that is pretty tough to manage. At the first car wash, which is well established and busy and 9 years old, I did have a staff of 3 managers, which was arguably one too many, but you still have to find the right people, and the wrong person can ruin good managers. So it's been a real, the last 18 months have been a real learning curve for me
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
terms of managing managers. So
Mm-hmm.
currently I have no managers.
Okay.
It's a lot easier to do it all yourself and understand that you'll drop a number of balls, some of which could be important, than
Mm-hmm.
it is to manage around
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
constantly.
Wow.
Um, but in a perfect world, yes, I would have a site supervisor at the second car wash, which is a much simpler business model, and I would have a general manager or a full-time manager at the first car wash, and then, some staff underneath him or her
Mm-hmm.
who can help,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't what we have right now. But that's optimal.
Mm-hmm. Let's say you get the platform for the car washes. You got a lot of experience under your belt with other development projects. What would that look like if you could pursue those?
Well, one advantage to potentially growing the brand and having a couple more washes is that the economic concept of economies of scale and scope has real life applications. And so it would enable me to have a couple of full-time staff, some
Okay.
back of house, and probably some folks who have greater expertise and therefore, demand higher salaries,
Sure.
which would, again, this is all theoretical, free me up to do more of some of the creative stuff that I enjoy doing and I am frankly much better at doing
Mm-hmm.
than I am running a car wash. So what would that look like? I like gritty, I like cities, I like creating change, and I like just very interesting one-off projects.
Mm-hmm.
So I would really like to build a small mixed use building that is specifically purpose built, purpose designed for relatively high functioning individuals who are neurodiverse, probably those on the autism spectrum. Um, Early on, when I was about to start, even before I opened Gleam, a friend of mine introduced me to Blue Star Recyclers, and I got to be really good friends with their founder and CEO, who has since retired. He convinced me that there was a place for individuals with autism at the car wash. And so
Mm.
after some experimenting, we sort of settled on that 10 to 15 to 20% figure. We can't have a fully function, it's not possible to have a fully functioning for-profit business without a mix. So it can't be exclusively people who are neurodiverse if you intend to produce a certain product. But a lot of these folks are living at home,
Mm.
and a lot of their parents are worried about what will happen when their parents when they die.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with the proper support, a lot of people can and should thrive living on their own or living in a support system and outside of their own home. So it seems like there's definitely like a societal need, that there's a market demand. It's an interesting design
Mm-hmm.
challenge. And, there are all sorts of cool parcels in and around Denver that would function well for this. It'd be a little bit of a pilot project. There are definitely folks doing work like this, whether it's adaptive reuse, like taking old hotels, um, and giving them new life for certain populations. But I think it'd be really fun. Um, since my early 20s, have been a big supporter of mental health services. And I know from friends and family and myself as well, consuming mental health services, it's really better if you're in a good environment, if there's daylight, if there's sound attenuation. So another concept that I had was to do a purpose-built, relatively small, essentially office building that is
Mm-hmm.
specifically tailored for the needs of therapists,
Mm-hmm.
psychiatrists, psychologists, and their patients. So I thought that would be kind of cool. And I was very optimistic when it looked like when it looked like Obamacare was really poised to give a lot more support towards mental health, that there would be a bigger demand for this because it could
Mhm.
pay for itself. Over the last 10 years, that hasn't really materialized, unfortunately. So it would be a larger challenge, but I think probably at the right scale, something that I could figure out.
Mm-hmm. Um, Give a little bit more of a definition of neurodiverse.
Well, I'm not a medical professional, but neurodiverse general, and it sounds wonderful. I don't know who wouldn't want to be neurodiverse. You sound like you're a superhero. Um, Essentially, it just means that your neurons are wired a little differently
Mm.
than maybe those of us who aren't. So it's another way of talking about autism spectrum disorder.
Oh,
I
okay.
think Down's syndrome falls into that category. So there are a lot of different diagnoses that can get captured under the umbrella of neurodiverse.
Okay. And then you mentioned turnbuckle. I'd love to know a little bit more about, I don't know that most people know what a turnbuckle is or how you use it or what the definition is, and it's a fascinating word in your for the title of your business.
I know, I really like it. So turnbuckles are tensioners, and so they help stabilize. You'll see them in a lot of civil engineering. If you walk around downtown Denver, all the big pedestrian bridges have huge turnbuckles on them, um, and they sort of connect opposing forces. So as I decided that this would be a really good name for my real estate development company, Turnbuckle, I came up with my own definition that sort of includes the actual definition of a turnbuckle, but makes it easier to understand why someone might name a real estate development turnbuckle. So, a turnbuckle is a counter-threaded device used for its strength and durability in high-tension applications. Turnbuckles strengthen the whole by uniting opposing forces. And so I put that on my letterhead. It's on my website. Um, I just thought it kind of captured the essence of what the tool is physically.
Yeah,
As well as conceptually, like my approach to real estate development.
I can really see that. I can really see that because boy, it is a pulling together of a lot of forces to pursue the real kind of real estate development that you want to do. But it's admirable, um, the focus that you have.
Thanks.
I
Well,
love
we'll
it.
see. I've been car washing for the last 10 years, so I haven't done a ton of real estate development. I mean, I did develop the first one, and it was a process. It was an infill site. Some
Mm,
people did not want a car wash. We did have an interesting planning overlay, so it had to conform to Main Street zoning. So
mhm.
it was a good, challenging real estate development project. The second one, it was a conditional use, and I did have to subdivide 4 acres of land so that I could kind of extract the portion of property that would be good for the car wash. And I did some really interesting um, work within that construct. One of the things that I did was I had my design team design a sign that completely ignored all of the zoning because the sign I would have wound up with had I conformed to the existing sign zoning ordinance would have been just so ugly.
Sure.
And so I looked at Colfax, and Colfax is a super cool street. All of this old time Googie architecture and signage. And so I just wanted the new project to sort of speak to that heritage.
Right.
So, of course, the planning department said, well, we can't approve this because this doesn't conform to any of the existing zoning and the regulations. And I said, I'm aware of that. And so they had to take it to, I think that was with the planners, and they had to take it to the planning commission. They said, what? And so the next step, which I had anticipated, was to take it to all of city council. City council is allowed to grant exceptions based on 2 things. One is hardship and one is mysteriously design. So they had never granted an approved exception based on design until I took this through. And we did get unanimous approval for this super cool sign. So I did get to do some fun development stuff with both of these projects, but it has been a little while
Mhm.
since I was actively doing real estate development, and it would be fun to do it again.
I bet it would be. So as we kind of wrap up here,
Yep.
what would be the best way for people who are interested more in what you're doing and learning? What would be some of the best ways for them to do that?
Well, your daughter is helping redesign my website. So
Mm-hmm.
folks could, pretty soon the website will be redesigned and it'll be a little bit more modern. So that's one way to just kind of see what I've worked on, some of the concepts that I'd like to work on, and to
Mm-hmm.
get in touch with me. You can also check out the Gleam Car Wash website, which is
Okay.
pretty darn cool. Tells you a lot about the business and how it's
Mm-hmm.
run.
Mm-hmm. So Turnbuckle is turnbuckle.com.
Turnbuckle.com and gleamcarwash.com.
Okay, well, those are very easy websites to Google and find. And I think anybody would be fortunate to learn more about it and see what you're up to, because I think it's fabulous. So
Thanks.
I
I
sure,
appreciate that.
yeah, I sure appreciate your time today, Emilie. Thank you so much for being my guest, and I'm excited for your future.
Me too. Thanks, Judy, for having me on board. This was
Yeah.
really super fun. It was delightful to meet you.
Oh, yeah, you too, Emilie. Thank you.
You're delightful. Thank
Oh.
you.
Thanks so much for joining us for the Inspired Impact podcast. To listen to past episodes, please visit theinspiredimpactpodcast.com.